Hi everyone, my name is Eugene Meidinger, and welcome to my course, Deploying and Publishing Power BI Reports. I'm a business intelligence consultant working independently, and in this course, we're going to learn how to scale up our deployments from 5 users to 5,000 users. Some of the major topics that we're going to cover include basic report publishing, embedding reports, and choosing the right deployment method. There's a lot of different options there, and we're going to help you pick the right one. By the end of this course, you'll know which deployment method is right for you and your organization. Before beginning this course, you should be familiar with creating Power BI reports. I hope you'll join me on this journey to learn Power BI with the Deploying and Publishing Power BI Reports course at Pluralsight. Hi, my name is Eugene Meidinger, and I work as a business intelligence consultant. In this course, we're going to cover all of the different ways to deploy Power BI reports, and we'll talk about which method is right for you. So, you may be wondering, why do we need hours of content on how to deploy Power BI reports? Can't I just hit the publish button and be done with it? Well, you certainly can, but that ignores a number of issues. First, Power BI doesn't have one-size-fits-all licensing. It has one-size-fits-most licensing with the Power BI Pro license. But if you have over 500 users, you may want to use Power BI Premium instead. If you're an independent software vendor, you'll want to use Power BI Embedded. Those pricing differences can be huge. Do you want to pay $10 per month for a single user? Or do you want to pay $5,000 per month for Power BI Premium? Second, is the question of security and control. If one of your users uses the publish to web option, all of that data is publicly available. Let me say that again. Publicly available. That's a huge security risk. Your ability to manage your reports and your data depend a lot on your deployment method. Finally, security isn't the only reason you may want a more centralized or controlled approach. You may want that for just good old plain data governance. If you work for a Fortune 500 company, then you're going to have auditors, and you won't be able to let anyone touch financial reporting. You'll have to have that locked down, and the way to do that will be with a Power BI app. In contrast, if you're making some charts for your daughter's lemonade stand, Publish to Web is a great option. Ultimately, this all comes down to trade-offs. Whether you're dealing with 5 users or 5,000, you're going to have to look at the pros and cons of each and every option. So, what trade-offs are there? In my mind, there's a big one that drives a lot of this discussion. One of the big selling points of Power BI is the self-service capability. Users creating their own reports, meeting their own needs, it sounds great, right? Well, it turns out that deployment methods like manual sharing are great for self-service, but absolutely terrible for sharing with the broader organization. In addition to that, company-wide reports often have higher stakes involved, and so you'll want to make sure that you have a QA process, that you're checking for data integrity, that you've finely tuned these outputs that you're creating. The more users you want to reach, the more centralized control you need to do it well. In the next clip, we're going to go through all of the deployment methods through the lens of scaling up and out. In this section, we're going to run through all of the different deployment options that we'll be covering in this course. We're going to be doing that by looking at user count. How do you scale from 5 users to 5,000? So, and I almost don't want to mention this because it's so silly, but we've got the simplest possible sharing scenario, sharing with yourself. When you've only got to provide reporting to just one person, you can just publish to your local workspace and call it a day. And later on in the module, we'll show you exactly how to do that. But if the only person you had to collaborate with was yourself, this would be a very short module indeed. For me personally, a big part of why I went into IT was I wasn't good with people. I didn't know how to communicate with them well, but I did really well with computers. But in reality, it turned out to be a bit of a bait and switch because so much of business intelligence is understanding the business and the business users. And so often you have to work with a team and share that work with a handful of people. The easiest way to do this is to just share a single report with those individuals. This only takes a few seconds and very little planning overall. Now, let's say that you want to share multiple reports. In that case, you could create a dashboard and share that dashboard. A Power BI dashboard is a set of tiles that link to individual reports. It's a navigation option as much as it is a display option. Finally, let's say that you want to collaborate on reports. What's the best option for that? Well, in that case, you'll want to share a workspace. A workspace is basically a container for report objects. You can think of it a lot like a file folder, but for Power BI. We'll talk more about workspaces in just a little bit. Okay, so you're able to share with your team, but manually sharing each and every report one by one is going to get unwieldy and tedious really fast. And just because you want to share reports with accounting doesn't mean you want to give them the reins and give them permission to change things. So, if we want to share reports, but in a controlled way with all of the Power BI users in our organization, what do we do then? Our best option is to use App Workspaces, also known as Power BI apps. Now, I'm personally not a fan of the name because it implies a lot of interactivity. When I think of apps, I think of Office for Android, or I think of mobile games, or some sort of GPS utility. In reality, a Power BI app is just a workspace that has been wrapped up with a bow and published to the whole organization. If you're planning on doing any sort of centralized report distribution, apps are the way to go. Now, I do have to mention one other option: organizational content packs. These are deprecated but not dead, not yet. Apps have replaced them in every aspect except for one. Content packs don't receive updates from the original copy. So they're ideal for templating because let's say that I change the logo or move a visual or change a filter on a report. If I'm using a Power BI app and I hit publish, then anyone who subscribed to that app gets those changes. But we may not always want that. We may not want to overwrite anything that the user has done. With an organizational content pack, if I make changes to the original pack, it doesn't overwrite anything the user's done. It doesn't push those changes out because they've basically stamped out a personal copy. So that's the one area where it makes sense to use content packs today. Now, there's some cases where sharing with 50 Power BI users just isn't going to cut it. You may have an organization of 500 or 1,000 users, and so if you want to bring Power BI to the masses, you're going to have to take a different approach. Instead of licensing users, you may want to license by capacity. Think of this like instead of having to pay tolls for each individual car on a set of roads, you're paying for the roads themselves. The first capacity licensing model is Power BI Premium. Power BI Premium is the exact same user experience as regular Power BI. But instead of having to pay for individual users, you pay for compute nodes that support premium workspaces. Essentially, you're licensing the infrastructure instead of the users. Another option is Power BI Report Server. Power BI Report Server is an on-premises deployment solution for Power BI. Under the hood, it's SQL Server reporting services with the ability to render Power BI reports. Finally, there's SharePoint Embedding. Specifically, SharePoint Online, not on-premises. This can allow you to take advantage of your company's intranet to distribute reports to the whole organization without having to train everyone on how to use PowerBI.com. Embedding in SharePoint can also be backed by Power BI Premium, meaning that you could license all 200 or 500 users by capacity instead of having to pay for each individual user. Finally, we have some interesting edge cases that not many of you are going to use. What if you want to deploy reports so that thousands of people can access them? In that case, you have two options. First, you can publish to web. This allows anyone with the URL to be able to access and view your report for free. Great, right? Well, not so fast. You may be saving money, but you're also giving them access to the underlying data set. Publish to web makes the data public, completely public, so tread with caution. Another option is Power BI Embedded. This is for independent software vendors that want to embed Power BI into their applications. This is not for the faint of heart. You'll need to hire a web developer, and she'll have to roll out all of the security and permissions for you. This will be the right choice for a very select few of you. In order to understand the different deployment options, we need to talk a moment about Power BI Service. 90% of the time, you're going to be deploying your reports to the Power BI service. By understanding what we're deploying to, we can better talk about the trade-offs of the different deployment options. Anytime you're using PowerBI.com, you're taking advantage of the Power BI service. Anytime you're publishing your reports to the cloud, you're taking advantage of the Power BI service. Now, some people may criticize me for a gross simplification, but as a rule of thumb, the way that you can remember it is PowerBI.com is the Power BI service. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but for most use cases, it's true. Before we get into the exact details of all these moving parts for the Power BI service, let's talk about what the Power BI service isn't, because often it's listed in contrast to other tools like Power BI Desktop and Power BI Mobile. And in many ways, this can be a simpler definition because there's so many things the Power BI service does. It's easier to talk about the things that it doesn't do. So first, we have Power BI Desktop. Power BI Desktop is the report authoring tool you will use to write Power BI reports. As the name implies, this is going to be installed on your personal desktop. Next is Power BI Mobile. This is installed on your phone, and this is how you view reports from your mobile device. Finally is the Power BI Report Server. This is a true replacement in many aspects to the Power BI service. This is an option for companies that are heavily invested in SSRS or paginated reporting, or those that don't want to use the cloud at all, perhaps for regulatory reasons. So now that we've talked about what the Power BI service isn't, let's dig into some of the moving pieces and talk about some of the data flow. So I've got two sections here. I've got on-premises, and then I've got the Power BI service up in the cloud. And as we covered in the last slide, when you write a report, you're doing it in Power BI Desktop. While you're testing your report, you're going to pull data from some sort of data store. It could be Excel files or a SQL database. And whenever you hit Save on your report, it saves a PBIX file. And then when you hit Publish, that file gets sent off to the Power BI service up in the cloud. In reality, the cloud in this case is some Azure data center nearby. For me personally, when I hit publish, my file goes to the East US 2 Azure data center in Virginia. As part of the file upload, you're also uploading a copy of the data called a dataset in Power BI terms. Now, let's say the user wants to view this beautiful new report you just made and published. She's going to try to access the report from the Power BI service. But before she can do that, she has to log in. The security around the Power BI service is integrated with Azure Active Directory. So whatever account you use to log in to Office 365 or Azure Active Directory, you will use that exact same account to interact with the Power BI service. Finally, once she's logged in, she can navigate the PowerBI.com website to view the specific reports she wants to see. Using a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, PowerBI.com will render interactive reporting right in the browser. So that's it. Easy, right? Well, let's wait. There's one last thing. Let's say that the data changes. Data is very rarely static, so you have to update it. Well, you don't want to hit publish every single week just to update the data. So there's one last piece in all these moving parts, and that's the on-premises data gateway. This piece of software will reach out to the Power BI service regularly to see if it needs to shuttle any data out to the cloud. To learn more about this piece, check out my course, Leveraging Timely On-Premises Data with Power BI. Okay, so that's everything for now, I swear. In this demo, we're going to create and publish a report. We're also going to see how to delete a report. So I've created an incredibly simple report showing that we have 9,000 cats. So we made this report and we want to upload it so that other people can see it, so that we can share it with our colleagues. Now, on the top right, you can see there's a publish button. And when we hit publish, we're going to save this to the cloud, to PowerBI.com, to the Power BI service, based on the file name on the top left. So let's go ahead and just click the publish button, and you'll see that it's asking us, where do we want to put it? Now, in this case, we only have two options to start with. We have my personal workspace, and then the Pluralsight shared workspace that I might use to share and collaborate with colleagues. In this case, I'm just going to upload to my personal workspace. Maybe this isn't ready for prime time just yet. So when I hit select, it's going to work on uploading all the information, publishing the information. and we can see it's a success. And if I go ahead and click on Open, then we can see the report in powerbi.com. And later on, we'll see how to share individual reports and collaborate with other people. So that's all there is to uploading a report. In this demo, we're going to delete a report because sometimes you upload things that you don't want anymore, don't need anymore. Deleting a report is fairly simple, but there is one gotcha. So this report is in my workspace. So if I go over to the left and expand my workspace, I can see there's upload_example. And I can click on the ... or ellipses and say remove. Now, this isn't going to do exactly what I want. If I hit remove, it's going to ask me, do you want to delete it? I'm going to say delete it. And it looks like I've gotten rid of the report, which is true. I can click on reports and see there's nothing there. But I didn't get rid of my data set. So again, just like before, I can find the ellipses. I can go delete. Same thing. It's going to delete my data set. Now, if you want to save time, you just start with deleting the data set outright. And that's going to delete any reports that are living on top of that data set as well. So that's all there is to it to deleting your reports from the Power BI service. So what is a workspace? It turns out that even though it sounds like something really important, it's pretty darn simple. A workspace, when it comes down to it, is just a container for your report objects. By report objects, I mean datasets, reports, and dashboards. Workspaces provide a way to organize content, collaborate on those reports, control security, and share that content. But when you boil it down, it's just a container, it's just a box. You can think of it like a file folder on your computer. So what sort of things go into a workspace? What is it used to hold? What's in that box? Well, there's 4 things that you can put into a workspace. First are datasets. These are the foundation for any reports you might want to create. Next are the reports that you build on top of your datasets. These make up the core functionality of Power BI. This is what everyone comes to see. But once you have some reports, you need a way to tie them together. And the way that you do that is with dashboards. Finally, you can upload Excel workbooks, either for your own personal reference or as a data source. In this demo, we're going to create a workspace so that we have somewhere to deploy, because until we have a workspace, we can't publish anything to the cloud. In this demo, we're going to be adding a new workspace because there's only so much you can do out of your own personal workspace. It's not good data governance to have everything living in your personal workspace. You might win the lottery or decide to leave the company at some point, and then everyone's going to be in a lot of trouble because they may not be able to access or modify the reports that you had. So we're going to create a workspace, and it's really simple to do. I just go over to Workspaces, select Create App Workspace. Now, the app doesn't mean too much. Every workspace is an app workspace. The reason that they call it that is because they added Power BI apps, which we're going to cover later in the course, and as a way of sharing and publishing content to the broader organization. But in this case, we just need a workspace. We just need a box or container to hold our stuff in. So I'm going to say Create App Workspace. You give it a name, so I'm going to call this Plural Site Test. And then you can decide, okay, do I want it to be private or do I want everyone to be able to see it? And do I want people that I invite to be able to make changes and collaborate with me, or just to be able to read the content? Finally, you can decide, oh, okay, I want to add Eugene to this. I want to add him as a member right away. So if I click Save, now we can see that it's created our workspace, and I can go ahead and click on it and go to it. But you can see that there's nothing here. It says, welcome to the Pluralsight Test Workspace, but we don't have any content yet. But this shows you just how easy it is to create a new workspace and start collaborating with your peers in the organization. In this module, we took a high-level view of all the different ways to deploy Power BI reports. Specifically, we took the lens of scaling up from 5 users out to 5,000 users. We also saw how to publish and delete reports on the Power BI service, which will be a necessary step for most deployment methods. Finally, we talked about workspaces and took a look at how to create one. In the next module, we're going to go from sharing with ourselves, which we've done so far, to other people. Specifically, we're going to talk about, all right, how do we share reports? How do we share dashboards? Because you put in so much work in these reports and dashboards, it would be a shame not to share them with other people. Hi, my name is Eugene Meidinger. In this module, we're going to look at the easiest way to share and deploy your reports, which is manual sharing. This can be done at the report level or at the dashboard level. When you're just getting started with Power BI, manual sharing can be a great tool. Before we can talk about sharing dashboards, we need to talk about what goes into them. Specifically, a Power BI dashboard isn't what you might expect. It's just a bunch of tiles. And those tiles each link to a specific report. And each report depends on a specific data set. After we talk about what goes into a dashboard, then we can talk about sharing. First, we're going to discuss sharing individual reports. This is the simplest and easiest sharing option. It's also the least scalable. If you have 1 or 2 reports, this is really convenient. But if you have 15, it doesn't make sense. The next step up is to share entire dashboards. This can be a nice way to tie together multiple reports in a single package. Manual sharing is the quickest way to deploy reports, but manual never scales. And here we can see the tension between self-service and scaling. While manual sharing is the quickest and easiest way to get going, if you need to share with 50 or 100 people, you're going to realize that it's just not the right solution. In this module, we're going to focus on how to share with small groups of people. Sharing individual reports or dashboards fits squarely with sharing with a handful of people. As we scale up to 50, 500, or 5,000, we'll look at other ways to approach deployments. The parts that make up a Power BI dashboard can be a bit confusing at times. We're going to dig in and understand what goes into building a dashboard in Power BI. First, how does Microsoft define what dashboard means? If you search for what is a Power BI dashboard, the first result is going to be some Microsoft documentation on the subject. In the very first line, they say, a Power BI dashboard is a single page, often called a canvas, that uses visualizations to tell a story. Now, that's definitely true, but you can accomplish the same definition only using Power BI reports. So what's the difference? Why bother? Power BI dashboards are a navigation tool and an organization tool. Whenever I say that Power BI dashboards aren't available with Power BI on premises, people freak out. Aren't dashboards the whole point of analytical reporting? Well, let me clarify things before you freak out too. The unique value being added with dashboards as far as Power BI defines them is they add navigation capabilities. They add a central hub to work from. It's a way to tie together multiple reports by pinning the most important visualizations as tiles. If you don't need that organization, you don't need Power BI dashboards. Let's be honest, the way that Power BI organizes its report components can be a bit confusing, including some of the naming. So let's start at the very beginning and work our way up the chain. First, we have queries. One query might be a CSV file, another might be a SQL database, another might be an Excel file. All these queries come together to form a data set. Now, each data set is normally tied to a single report. Well, what's a report, you might say? Well, based on the data set, we can create multiple pages with visualizations on them. This is the core functionality of Power BI, visualizations on pages. This is what Power BI refers to as a report. You might colloquially think of a report as a single page or a collection of workbooks, but for Power BI, it means a set of pages with visualizations. Okay, so we have a bunch of reports now. How do we tie those together? With something Power BI calls a dashboard. This is another point of confusion. You may consider a page covered in KPIs or graphs and charts to be a dashboard, but for Power BI, it's a set of pins or tiles that link to various reports. Again, you can think of it as more of a navigation tool. All right, so let's do this one more time from the beginning. We read our data from files or databases. These are considered queries. A set of queries forms a data set. A data set is tied to exactly one report, although there are ways to reuse data sets, but starting out, every data set is going to be tied to a specific report. Each of those reports is a set of pages with visualizations. Finally, multiple reports are tied together with a dashboard. Clear as mud, right? Well, don't worry. As we work through the different deployment options, we'll keep touching upon these concepts, and by the end of the course, you're going to have it down pat. So now that we understand what Microsoft means when they are talking about a Power BI report or a Power BI dashboard, we can start to talk about how we share them with others so we can collaborate. If you need to share content within Power BI, the quickest and easiest way is by sharing a report directly with other users. It's simple and efficient, but doesn't always scale as well as we would like. So when you first start out with Power BI, it's all pretty simple. First is you, and you make a report. Great. But if you can't share it, it's worthless. If you can't share it, you're just making your own life easier. Now, Susan in accounting wants to see your report, so you click the share button and you share with her. Awesome. Oh, wait, we have a problem. We have a teeny tiny problem that might become a really big problem. Susan likes the report. That's not the problem. She likes it so much she told Bob about it. Now Bob wants to see it. Okay, one more person. That's easy enough. We'll just go in and add him. Oh, what's this? Okay, Bob showed the report to Karen and she wants to see it too. Fine. We'll just add in her in as well. There, we're finally done. Oh, no. Karen showed it to her boss and he wants you to give the whole accounting department access. This is getting out of control. Well, I hope at the very least that you have all of them in an Office 365 group. Otherwise, you're going to have to add them all in by hand. I said it earlier in the module, and I'm going to say it again. Manual sharing doesn't scale. Seriously. It's great for getting started, but it's far from a centralized approach. As we continue through the course, the methods we will look at will get more and more centralized and more scalable until we can handle 5,000 users with ease. If you share a report directly, permissions are managed on that report. Now, let's say that Karen gets a lateral promotion and becomes an operations manager. Great for her, bad for us. Now she's in a different department and perhaps shouldn't have access to confidential financial reporting. So we need to remove her. Now, if someone is managing your Office 365 groups, this will happen automatically. But what if you don't? Well, like I said, you just remove her manually. Now, what if you have 12 reports? Well, then you'd have to remove her 12 times, and that's just not any fun. In this demo, we're going to look at how to share a report with other users or groups. Then we're going to look at how you remove and manage access to those reports. So let's say you've made this beautiful report, and now you want other people to be able to actually use it. So what we're going to do is show you how to share. Now, the report that you see in front of you was not made by me. I am not that good at report design. This is by Microsoft, and this is the exact file that they use to show off the new features in the 2018 July version of Power BI Desktop. So we want to share this report to other people on a report basis. So you can see on the top right is the share button. I'm going to click on that. And now I'm going to have the option of adding an individual user. So I'm going to add someone named test user. So they have a very strange name, but we're just going to go with it. We can put in a message and say, check out my report. Add a few exclamation points because we're so excited. And then the next checkbox is interesting. We can say, okay, you can read this report, but we don't want you to be able to pass it along to other people. And so they're going to get an email notification, hey, you have this report. It should also show up in the shared with me section. And so I'm going to hit share. And now they have access. Now, what if we realize later, oh, wait, I did want them to be able to share with other people. I can go back to share and I can click on access. And now I can say, oh, I'm going to click on this ... I want them to have read and reshare capabilities. Or I can say, you know what, I don't even want them to have access at all. And one of the things that's interesting is whenever you give someone access to the report, you give them access to the underlying data set. And so when you remove access, you have to think and say, oh yeah, I don't want them to still have access to the underlying data. So I'm going to remove that as well. Another thing is that there's managed permissions here, and it's the same sort of idea. So I can add users, I can click on the ... that would show up over to the right here, and I can remove or change their permissions. The reason you would go here is that you've got more screen real estate. So if you have 50 users all on one report, it's easier to manage them that way. So that's it. That's all you need to know when it comes to sharing and securing individual reports. In this clip, we're going to go a level above report to the dashboard level. As I said earlier, dashboards in the Power BI world are as much an organization and navigation tool as they are for raw reporting. Okay, so let's say you have a set of reports that you want to group together in some way. Maybe these form a management dashboard of some sort, and you have a set of users you want to share them with. Well, if you're sharing manually, report by report, the number of shares grows quadratically. 3 reports and 3 users equals 9 shares. 10 reports and 10 users equals 100 shares. Now, I can hear some of you in the back shouting, but what if we use Office 365 groups? Yes, that will help tremendously, but it can still be tedious. What if there was a better way? What if instead we had some way to tie together those reports and share that combined entity? We can, using a dashboard. We take visuals from each report and pin them to the dashboard, and then we share that dashboard with all of the users or the Office 365 group. In this demo, we'll show you how to create a dashboard. That way, in the next demo, we can show you how to share and secure that dashboard. So we have this demo report from Microsoft, and we've already seen how to share and secure it. But what if you have 10 different reports? You're going to want some way to tie them together, some sort of hub for navigating between the different reports. And that's called a Power BI dashboard, which is different from what normal people think of when they think of a dashboard. Because you look at this, and this looks like what people would call a dashboard. To explain the difference, we're going to start creating a Power BI dashboard. So I'm going to hover over this visual, and you can see that there's a pin icon, and it says pin visual. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to say pin to dashboard, but I don't have a dashboard yet. So I'm going to make one called new dashboard, and I'm going to say pin, and I could go to that dashboard, but first I want to pin one more visual. So I'm going to hover over this visual, and you can see again there's a pin icon, and so I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to use an existing dashboard. So now I'm going to say pin, and I'm going to click go to dashboard. And so as you can see, now we've created a dashboard that we can share with other people. This demo is going to be pretty simple. Just like the report demo earlier in the module, we're going to look at sharing dashboards as well as securing them, and finally managing access to them. So now that we have this dashboard, we want to share it. And the process is virtually identical to when we were sharing reports. So again, on the top right, you can see the share button. And if we go up to it and we click on it, we can add a user. So again, I'm going to type in test. Oh, look, test Franklin user is there. So I'm going to again type in a message. So we can type in check out my awesome dashboard. And just like before, it's really important to have those exclamation points so they know it's a really good dashboard. And also like before, we have 2 levels of security access. We can have read and share, or I can say, you know what, I don't want you to be able to pass this on to other people. Maybe it's still in beta. We don't want other people looking at it just yet. So I'm going to click on share. And in this case, I got a failure notice because this particular user, I just signed up for an email account. So for whatever reason, it hasn't received it yet, or it's not quite done provisioning. And so that warning went away, but we can see that they were still given access. We were given read access. And let's say we want to change that. Again, just like before, we can come here and we can say, all right, I want read and reshare instead. And maybe we decide, you know what, this is too much of a mess. I'm going to cancel that invite and I'm going to just remove access entirely. Now, just like before, whenever you share a dashboard, it shares the underlying reporting artifacts. And in this case, it shares the report and the data set. And there's a little exclamation point by the data set because if you get rid of it, they can't access the reports on top of it. So again, okay, we don't want them to have access to the dashboard. Well, I don't want to accidentally give them access to the report. in a data set, so I'm going to remove that as well. And that's all there is to it to sharing and securing your dashboards. In this module, we're going to get to the bread and butter, the most common use case of deploying Power BI reports. If you're making organizational reports, that is reports that people in the organization need to see, then you need to know about App Workspaces. So the very first thing we need to talk about is why use an App Workspace at all. We've already discussed how to deploy and share reports individually, and if you're working at a startup of 20 people, that's all you really need. Once we've covered the general use case, we'll talk about what an App Workspace is. I'm not a fan of the name Power BI app. I think it suggests a level of interactivity that just isn't there. In reality, an App Workspace is a way of grouping report artifacts plus some QA and staging features. Next, I'll show you how to create and configure an App Workspace. Then, we'll look at how you can use an App Workspace as a staging repository. Finally, we're going to talk about something called organizational content packs. These are basically the V1 version of App Workspaces, and by and large, they've been deprecated. We'll talk about the one use case where they really stand out compared to App Workspaces, but mostly we're including them to let you know, don't use organizational content packs. When building and deploying reports, there are various different roles that need to be filled. First, you need a domain expert. When I did work in the fire protection industry, for example, I needed someone to tell me about the different inspection intervals between a wet sprinkler system, which is inspected quarterly, versus a fire extinguisher, which is inspected annually. Next, you need someone to actually write the report based on the specifications. If you're watching this course, this is probably you. If you aren't watching this course, tell Bob to turn down his volume. Once the report is written, someone needs to test it and make sure it's valid. This may be an end user, or it may be someone on a QA or quality assurance team. Next, you need someone to deploy it. When I did consulting for a large company, the report developers were not allowed to deploy the reports at all. There was a very strict separation between development, quality assurance, and production. This was because these were financial reports and was strictly regulated in the United States by Sarbanes-Oxley. Finally, once you have the report deployed, it needs to be accessed by your end users. Now, in smaller organizations, most of these roles are going to be occupied by one or two people, like in this diagram. But in bigger organizations, each of these roles may be occupied by a different individual or different teams of individuals. Anyway, we need a way to meet all of the needs of all of these different roles, and App Workspaces helps us do that. So at the beginning of this module, we talked about how there are different levels of sharing. In particular, we mentioned how if you want to share with just a few people, manual sharing makes a lot of sense. But if you want to be able to share with all of the Power BI users, App Workspaces is a better fit. So App Workspaces fills two roles. It lets you collaborate within your team, but it lets you share with the broader organization. More on that in the next clip. So now that we understand the general value of an App Workspace, let's talk about what really goes into it. An App Workspace is just a workspace with some nice wrapping paper. When I was a kid, my mom would wrap our presents in old newspaper. To her, it didn't really matter what covered it. It was the present inside that mattered. I haven't tried that trick with my wife. She would probably look at me funny and laugh if I gave her a birthday present covered in newspaper instead of nice wrapping paper. What I mean when I say that an App Workspace is like wrapping paper is that it cleans things up. It makes them look nice and more organized and puts it together into a clean package. But ultimately, the same reporting artifacts are still there underneath. When you get to the core, it's all just datasets, reports, and dashboards. Nothing fundamental has changed. We talked before about what a workspace is. A workspace is a container for dashboards, which organize reports, which have pages and visuals based off of a single dataset, which is made up of a bunch of queries to different data sources. If you've worked with your local workspace in PowerBI.com, all of this should be familiar to you. But if you're a manager, you don't want to have to think about all these layers of an onion that we have going on here. You just want the management reporting app that everyone can view in the management meeting. What you want is some nice wrapping paper and a bow. You just want to be able to look at your manager and tell her, here is your management meeting reports. Look how nicely they're all wrapped up. So what do we get for all this effort? Why can't we just wrap our presents in old newspaper like my mom used to do? So first, you get packaging. We already discussed this, but it's worth emphasizing. Imagine that you created financial reporting to be used by the whole organization. You want it to be the canonical source of data used by the entire accounting department. It has 5 different dashboards for various levels of detail and a dozen different reports. You don't want to spend an hour getting people set up. You just want to give them the finished product. Second is staging. When you're doing a rinky-dink report about your daughter's lemonade stand, you can afford to have some errors in the report. If the total sales for her business is off by $5, she might be mad at you, but you can take 30 minutes to fix it, bribe her with some ice cream, and everything is hunky-dory. However, if you're writing reports for a publicly traded company, it can be a big deal. Suddenly, you've accidentally committed fraud. So how do you avoid that? What you do is you have a QA, a quality assurance and validation process to make sure the numbers add up right, that the format is what the users want, and so on. The more important the report, the more extensive the validation process. Once you've staged and tested the reports, you need to publish them. With App Workspaces, you can hit one button and anyone who's subscribed to your app will get the updates. This is an advantage over organizational content packs, which we cover later in the course. Next is discoverability. Once you've published an app within an organization, users can search for that app and subscribe to it without you having to manually add them. This allows your organization to take more of a self-service model while still controlling the reporting centrally. Now, even though you want to make these apps discoverable, you don't want everyone to have access in most cases. App Workspaces also provide the ability to granularly control permissions on a Power BI app level. Finally, there's some branding. You can add descriptive information and an image to help make the app feel more cohesive. In this demo, we're going to show you how to set up an app workspace. It's so easy, you may have already done it. Then, we're going to see how to do the initial configuration of that app workspace. We'll show you how to publish changes, and then we'll show you how to maybe unstage changes that weren't quite ready for prime time. So we've created all this great content, but we want to be able to package it up in a way that's easy to manage, share, and update. So we're going to create an app workspace. So if I go to Workspaces, I can click on Create App Workspace because I only have my individual workspace, which isn't great because if I leave the organization, all that content is gone. So I'm going to say Create App Workspace, and I'm just going to call it New App. And I can decide, do I want it to be private? Maybe it's financial information, or do I want anyone to be able to see what's inside? And do I want members to be just members, or do I want them to be authors and be able to edit the content as well? Finally, I can add somebody in, and so I'm going to add test user. Now it's cut off on this browser, but here we've added test user as the starting member. So I'm going to tell it save, and so now we've got this workspace, and we've got this welcome page, but the problem is we don't have any content. So let's fix that. So here's the Microsoft blog demo for July of 2018. So this is the file that Microsoft uses to show off new features with Power BI Desktop. And we're not going to make any changes, we're just going to publish it to our app. And because we added an app workspace, I have a choice here. So I'm going to select New App, and I'm going to hit Select. And it's going to take just a couple seconds to upload that content. And we can see that it uploaded. Great. So now I'm going to close Power BI, and I'm going to hit Refresh, and we should see that our content has shown up. Now we don't have any dashboards, but we do have a report. So let's make a dashboard real quick. And I'm going to click on Overview, and I'm going to highlight over the visual. I'm going to pin it, say App, Dashboard. I'm going to pin another one as well so we have some content. Great. So now we have this content. How do we share it with the broader world? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to App Workspaces, and you can see on the top right is Publish App. So when I click on that, it wants some more information for how to wrap it up. It wants a description, so we're going to say this is our super cool app. We're going to change the general theming color. We're going to specify a landing page. So in this case, we're going to specify the report so that whenever they go to this app, that's where they start out. And then we can say access, and I can specify individuals or groups. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say, okay, for the entire organization, anyone can access it. And it's warning us, oh, this might take a couple minutes, but this is a tiny app, so it's going to take a few seconds. And so now we can go to the app. And if we go to the app, what's going to happen is it's going to get installed to our list of apps. And so it's pulling it up, and you can see apps is selected on the left, and there, it just installed our new app. Now, if we go to that new app and we look at the content, now at this point, I may have realized that I made a mistake. Maybe that dashboard wasn't ready for prime time. It didn't have enough visuals. It's still being pinned, all that kind of stuff. So what I can do is I can go back to that app workspace and I can say, oh, I messed up. I don't want this dashboard to be included in the app yet. It's not ready. And so I'm going to say update app and making sure that I've got everything checked out. And I'm going to say update app. And it's going to take a couple seconds. And now I've pulled back that information. So I was able to publish the app, stage work in progress, and unpublish certain pieces as necessary. And that's all you need to know to get started working with Power BI apps. We're going to look at a deprecated way of packaging and deploying your reports. Organizational content packs have only one area where they're superior to App Workspaces. Let me save you some trouble here. Don't use organizational content packs. Just don't. They're officially deprecated and will eventually be removed. App Workspaces are the version 2.0 way of organizing content at a company level. App Workspaces are better in every way. Well, except for one. So let's compare organizational content packs with App Workspaces. First, an organizational content pack behaves like a blueprint. You design it and then the users can make copies. An App Workspace, however, behaves like a subscription. So updates get pushed out to your users automatically when you publish them. Second, there's a one-to-many relationship between a workspace and a content pack. You can have multiple content packs all based off of the same workspace. With Power BI apps, there's a one-to-one relationship. Every app workspace corresponds to one app. End of story. Finally, the most important difference is that content packs are deprecated and app workspaces are recommended. So moving forward, you should be using Power BI apps and app workspaces. Now that we've covered the differences between organizational content packs and app workspaces, we can focus on the one useful difference. Content packs are good for templating, and that's it. Really. It allows users to copy and customize reports that you've made. And even that benefit is going away over time as Microsoft adds new features like persistent user filters. In this demo, we're going to see how to set up and configure an organizational content pack. Additionally, we'll see how a user can copy a content pack, and then see how they're able to make changes to their local copy. So now we're going to look at how to create, access, and modify a content pack. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the settings here and we're going to say create content pack. And so we're going to say the entire organization can use it, and we're going to call it my pack, and we're going to say test pack. Now you'll notice at the top, they really want you to use apps, but we're going to trudge forward and ignore that. We're going to specify that we want the new dashboard, and we're going to hit publish. So the question is, how do we access this content pack as a user? Well, I happen to have another version of Internet Explorer in private mode, you can see in the top left, because I want to be able to log in as a different user. In this case, I'm logged in as Mr. Test User or Miss Test User. Now, I want to access content pack. So I'm going to say get data, and I'm going to say, oh, I want to get information from my organization. It's an organizational content pack. Well, that's weird. There's my super cool app, but no content pack. What did I mess up? Well, it's deprecated. So when I say get data, I have to scooch all the way down and say organizational content packs. Now I can get it as test Kelly user. Now, looking at this dashboard, if I look at a pin, I can't get rid of it, right? So what I want to do is I want to make a copy. And it's going to copy all the pieces and name them as copy. And now I can say, oh, this is trash. I don't want this. Get rid of that tile, right? So that's the one benefit of organizational content packs is they allow you to take this packaged set of reports and dashboards and make modifications as a power user. But again, Microsoft is working to fill that gap. And so over time, organizational content packs are going to be completely deprecated and go away entirely. But for now, that's all you need to know about organizational content packs. In this module, we covered that app workspaces are just some fancy wrapping paper around your reports and dashboards. This wrapping paper allows us to have a more centralized model of design, test, and deploy. Next, we demoed how to create, configure, and share these app workspaces. Finally, we showed that content packs have been replaced and are really on life support right now. 99% of all the functionality that you would have used with content packs are now available in App Workspaces. In the next module, we're going to break out of the confines of PowerBI.com and look at how to reach the broader organization by embedding these reports in your local intranet or in the company extranet. Sometimes you don't want to take users out of their normal flow. Sometimes you want to take the capabilities of Power BI and use them in a different site. By embedding, we can enable those use cases. Power BI is great if your users are comfortable going to PowerBI.com. Let's assume that's 50 people in your organization. But what if you want an easy way to reach the other 450 people in your organization? How do you reach all of these? Well, one way is to embed it into applications they already use. That might be an internal intranet, that might be an SSRS report server, that might be SharePoint Online or Microsoft Teams. Now, taking it a step further, what if you want to reach people outside of your organization? What if you want to reach 5,000 users? Maybe you want to display your company reports on a public website. Or maybe you're an ISV and want to use Power BI as the reporting tool for your software as a service. In all these cases, we need to learn how to embed Power BI as we want to scale up and out. As a product, I absolutely love Power BI, but I'm not always a fan of it from a marketing perspective. Because Power BI has grown in an agile weekly sprint style as a product, its marketing and feature naming has grown the same way. And so Power BI naming is confusing, and embed means many things. When you say you want to embed Power BI, it can mean a handful of different things, as we'll see in the next clip. In this section, we're going to differentiate between the different types of embedding because there's quite a few and they're very different.
As I said before, the term embedding is a bit overloaded when it comes to Power BI. So let's walk through the different meanings, and then we'll go into more detail on each one individually. First is Office 365 embedding. This is a way of including Power BI reports in SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams if you happen to use either of those products. Next, there's report server embedding. So if you've worked with SQL Server report services, you may be familiar with this type of embedding. And so because Power BI report server is very, very similar, we can take advantage of a way of embedding a report into a web page using Report Server. Third is public embedding, or better known as publish to web. If you want to post a Power BI report on your company website or extranet, this is what you want. But beware, this makes the data public to the whole world. Finally, is software embedding. When you hear of Power BI embedded, this is what people are usually referring to. If you aren't a web developer creating custom software, this probably isn't the right choice for you. So now that we've touched on each of them, let's walk through all of them in more detail.
If your organization is making heavy use of SharePoint Online or Microsoft Teams, Office 365 embedding is a no-brainer. It's just a few clicks and you're all set up. Additionally, you have multiple licensing options. You can pay per user, or you can do capacity licensing. We're going to talk more about capacity licensing in the premium capacity module near the end of this course. Oh, what's that you say? Your organization doesn't use Office 365? In fact, they're allergic to the cloud in general? Worry not. You can embed Power BI reports locally with Power BI Report Service. However, this can require some work. It isn't hard per se, but I wouldn't expect your everyday business user to be able to do it. Secondly, it can be expensive to implement. You're talking about thousands of dollars per year to license Power BI Report Server, whereas Office 365 embedding, you can just license individual users. Finally, this is one of the most flexible embedding options because it builds upon the existing embed capabilities of SQL Server report services. This is doubly true for any on-premises embedding that you want to do. We don't cover how to do it in this module, but later in the course, we have a module all about Power BI Report Server, and we'll show you how to embed in an iframe with that module. Next up is public embedding, or publish to web. One of the benefits of this is that it's free. This is completely free, and currently the only way for free users to share their work as well. In addition to that, it's super easy. You select Publish to Web, and you get a link and an embed code. Then you just add it to any website. That's it. So what's the downside? Why not use it for your intranet? The downside is it's unsecure, like really unsecure. Like you could get fired if you do this with financial data unsecure, because public embedding makes all of the data public, everything. So anyone with the URL can access all of the data in the report. So only use this with reports that are based on public data or that you're comfortable publishing to the entire world. Finally, we have application embedding, also known as Power BI Embedded. Like I said, the naming on all this stuff can be confusing. Part of the reason they call it Power BI Embedded is at the beginning it was a separate offering that lived in Azure and was paid for separately. So, to save you some time, this is designed for independent software vendors only. If you don't make commercial software for a living, this isn't for you. There are some potential internal uses, but by and large, this is for external commercial software, unless you're a very large enterprise and you have a whole team of software developers. Part of the reason why is you have to roll your own security and controls. You get the rendering piece, but all of the user interface is on you. This gives you a lot of control, but it also means a lot of extra work. You also have to define security roles and manage those for yourself. It's a lot to do. It can also be expensive. You're paying for capacity instead of per user. So if you don't size things properly, you can rack up a big bill very quickly. In this demo, we're going to use the built-in Power BI web part to embed a Power BI report into a SharePoint Online team site. So we have our app and we have our report and we want to embed that into SharePoint Online. And it should be fairly simple to do, but it does require a couple of steps. So the first thing is I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say Embed in SharePoint Online. And this doesn't actually do the embedding. What it does is it gives me a link. So I'm going to right-click. So I'm going to right-click and select Copy. So now I've copied that link, and I'm going to go to a SharePoint site. Now, something's very interesting about this SharePoint site, and I'm wondering if you can notice it. It says New App, and it says Public Group. Now here's the interesting thing. I did not manually create this site. This site was automatically created when I created the App Workspace, because whenever you create an App Workspace, behind the scenes, that workspace is backed by an Office 365 group. And as a result, that group has a SharePoint site. So we're going to add a new page. So we're going to click on New, and we're going to click on Page. And so it'll take just a couple seconds. And so now we can call this page something. I'm going to say Power BI page. And so I'm going to add a web part. I need to scroll down because there are a lot of options for web parts, and one of these says Power BI. So we've added the web part, but it says, oh, we need a report. So when I click on Add Report, it's going to open up the settings pane, and I'm going to paste in that link that we got earlier. And it'll take a second to load, and now I'm going to pick which page I want. And so in this case, I'm just going to pick Overview. And I've got a couple other settings that I can mess with, but I'm not going to bother. And so now that report is embedded as a web part, and I can click on pieces and I can mess around with it if I want to. So I'm going to hit Publish. I'm going to publish that page now. So I'm going to close the options to share the information. But now you can see I've got a Power BI report embedded in a SharePoint site. In this demo, we'll show you how to add reporting to a Microsoft Teams channel with just a few clicks. So one of the other places where you can embed Power BI is in Microsoft Teams, which is an online software as a service product. And it's basically a competitor to Slack and other persistent chat programs. So I have a team already set up called Test Team. And so I've got this general channel, but what I want to add is I want to add Power BI. So I'm going to click on this plus. And then you can see right at the top over on the right is Power BI. Great. So now I can name the tab whatever I want. I can pick a workspace that I want to pull information from. And so here, I only have one report in the new App Workspace. I'm going to click on Save. And now our report's going to come up. And so other people on the team will be able to see and interact with this report. And again, you get the same sort of embedding interface where you don't get any of that outside Chrome, but you can click on charts, you can add filters, you can do all this sorts of stuff. And that's all there really is to embedding Power BI into Teams. In this demo, we're going to show you how to create a public link for one of your Power BI reports, and then using that link, embed it into a public web page. Finally, when you realize that you didn't mean to make all of that data publicly available, we'll show you how to disable that embedding, both on an individual report level and on the entire tenant. So here we have this report, and we've seen that we can embed it in Office 365, but maybe we want to share it with the entire world, right? So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say Publish to Web. And first it's going to say, here's what it means to embed in a public website, create the code. And it's going to go, whoa, 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 no, here's what it really means to embed in a public website. It's public. Everyone would have access to your underlying data. And I'm going to say, oh, that's fine. So I'll hit Publish, and it'll give me a link that I can send to people, but it's also going to give me something called an iframe, which is a HTML object to embed information. So I'm going to close that. And I have this website that I made that really doesn't have much going on for it. We want to pizzazz it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert that iframe. I'm going to change the frame border to 1 so it's a little bit easier to see, and I'm going to hit Save. And so now if I refresh that web page, we can see that it's embedded in the page. And we can see that I've got all the same interactivity that I would normally expect from a Power BI report. I just don't have any of that outside Chrome or anything like that. And so that's all you need to know to do the embedding. But what if you say, oh, wait, did we accidentally publish public financials? How do we undo this? Don't worry. So we're going to go back to Power BI, and we're going to go to the settings gear, and we're going to go to manage embed codes. And so you can see we only have one public embed publish to web link. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's get rid of that. Boy, that was a close call. Maybe we want to disable it for everybody, just for now. So we're going to go to that settings gear again. We're going to go to the admin portal, and we're going to go to tenant settings. And you can see there's publish to web. So here I could enable or disable it, or I could say, okay, only authorized publishers can publish reports, and I could specify a specific security group. So that's how you undo publish to web. That's how you manage it as a whole.
Oh boy, we've covered a lot of content in this module. As a reminder, when you want to scale up and out, you really want to consider using Power BI embedding as your solution. Unfortunately, there are a lot of different types of Power BI embedding, so it can be really confusing. First, there's Office 365 embedding in SharePoint and Teams. But if the cloud isn't for you, there's Power BI report server embedding. If you want to share outside of your organization, public embedding might be for you. Finally, if you produce commercial software or significant amounts of internal software for your organization, there's application embedding. In the rest of the course, we're going to talk about some of the more esoteric ways to deploy Power BI reports. In this module, we're going to talk about premium capacity. In many ways, it's more of a licensing model than a deployment model. To understand premium capacity, we need to understand capacity-based licensing. So first, let's talk about user licensing as a contrast. Imagine your company wants to pay for transportation for its employees to get to and from work. Maybe they want to help save the environment and reduce emissions, right? One way to do that would be to pay for bus passes. Every month, the company pays $50 for each and every single employee, no matter what. And those employees get a bus pass that allows them to take unlimited bus rides. This is what user licensing is like, and is the most common form of Power BI licensing. However, there's also capacity licensing. Let's say that some employees are complaining about having to share a bus with strangers. Maybe their music is too loud. They've got a noisy neighbor problem. And other employees, well, they work from home most of the time and barely use that bus pass. So you have a low frequency user problem. Well, what could you do to fix both of these issues? Well, you could rent a whole bus yourself. This is capacity licensing. You're paying for the infrastructure, for the total capacity, and you pay the same price whether you have nobody on the bus or every single seat is full. Each option has its ups and downs. There are three types of premium capacity available. First is A, or application level capacity. This is for commercial software vendors mainly, and we discuss it in depth in the next module. Next is the EM level capacity. The E stands for embedding, not Power BI embed ed, and the distinction can be somewhat confusing sometimes. So remember, this is for embedding, not Power BI embedded. And this in particular allows the users to use Office 365 embedding for free without being licensed. This does not give them access to PowerBI.com. For that, you are going to need the P level capacity, which stands for premium. Go figure. This allows as many free users on PowerBI.com as your metaphorical bus can fit. I would be remiss talking about premium capacity if I didn't talk about the premium cost you have to pay. With the A level, you can pay anywhere from about $700 a month to $23,000 depending on which of the 8 levels you select. The good news is that you're billed hourly, and you can pause that A level at any time. So if you only use 2 hours in a given day, you only pay for 2 hours. Next, the EM level costs anywhere from $600 or so per month to $2,500. Finally, the big enchilada, is the P level, what starts at $5,000 per month and goes all the way up to $20,000 per month. As you can see, premium capacity is not for the faint of heart or the small of wallet. And in addition to that, you're paying per month, and there's this annual commitment that you're making. You're saying, we're going to be using this for a whole year. But wait, it gets worse. Here's something that surprises people whenever I tell them about premium capacity. Even if you have premium capacity and you don't have to pay for individual consumers, you still have to pay for report authors and content creators. Premium capacity metaphorically covers the cost of the bus ticket, but you still have to pay for the bus driver. You have to license that bus driver. In this section, we're going to cover how to implement and use premium capacity. So, as much as I'd like to show you a live demo of premium capacity is, unsurprisingly, really expensive. So instead, I'm going to try my best to explain it through some animations which are much cheaper. But if you do want to see a little bit of demo, take a look at the application embedding module, because a lot of the user interface is going to be similar when it comes to assigning premium capacity to content. So first, we have the Power BI service, which supports all of our reporting. And the first report we make is a management application for Power BI. This has reporting needed for the weekly management meeting. This is simple to license because we only have, say, 50 managers in the organization. We can assign a Power BI license to each one of them. Now, let's say we expand from here and make an operations report. And each of those 50 managers manages 10 technicians. Well, now we have a problem. Do we want to pay for an individual license for each of those technicians? What if some of them are very infrequent users of the reporting? That's a lot of licenses. That's 500 licenses. In comes premium capacity. Let's say we purchase the P1 level of premium capacity. Now, we can move that operations app from the shared Power BI service to the premium capacity. And now our technicians who are free users can access that operations app. They can't access the management application because it's not assigned to premium capacity, but that's okay. Now, the thing that I want you to get out of this, the most important thing, is that we do not assign users to premium capacity. We assign content to premium capacity. It was when we moved the operations application from the shared Power BI service to the premium capacity for Power BI that the free users, our technicians, were able to access it. So we talked about how premium capacity works and why you might want to use it. In this section, we're going to talk about whether it's right for you. When you're looking at paying thousands of dollars per month, you really want to think this through. So the biggest question is, do you have 500 users that will be using Power BI? If the answer is no, then premium is probably not for you. 500 is the magic number where it costs exactly the same to license each of those 500 users individually or to pay for a P1 level of Power BI Premium. We'll talk about some of the other benefits of Power BI Premium, but this is the biggest one by far, is the cost savings whenever you have a large number of users. So what are some of these other benefits? Well, we already talked about the idea of capacity licensing in general, and one of the other benefits is separate hardware. So I referenced this earlier when I talked about the noisy neighbor problem. Your little corner of PowerBI.com is going to be running on dedicated virtual machines. If performance is a must, this might be a selling point for you. Second, are frequent refreshes. Normally, you can only schedule a refresh for a dataset up to 8 times per day. For low priority reports, every hour during business hours is perfectly fine. But for mission critical reports or global reports, that may not be sufficient. With Power BI Premium, you can refresh a dataset up to 48 times per day. On top of that are incremental refreshes. If you're dealing with very large datasets, you can update just the most recent data using the incremental refresh functionality. Next is Power BI Report Server. For every virtual core you license with Power BI Premium at the P level, you also get a license for that many cores of Power BI Report Server. This can allow you to baby step your way up to the cloud or to have a hybrid solution with some reports in the cloud and some on premises. Another feature in line with this is SSRS rendering. You can run SQL Server Reporting Services reports in PowerBI.com if you have the P level of Power BI Premium. This could allow you to move your reporting investment to Power BI Report Server and slowly migrate it to PowerBI.com, eventually having all of your reports in the cloud. As of this recording, this feature is still in preview. Finally, is multi-geography support. Normally when you set up Power BI, your reports are going to run in whatever the heck data center your Office 365 tenant is set up for. But let's say that you're in the United States and your tenant's in the United States, but your company has offices in Europe. One option to address that issue would be to license some capacity that's dedicated to Europe so that your reports hosted there have better performance for your European users. So to recap a little bit, what actual problems does this offering solve? First, if you have a huge number of users, more than 500, it's just mathematically cheaper to go with Power BI Premium than to just license each user individually. This should be the biggest consideration as to whether to use Power BI Premium. Part of that calculation should also be if you have low frequency users. A single bus can transport hundreds of people just as long as they don't get on all at once. If you have a lot of users that need Power BI but only occasionally, capacity-based licensing might be right for you. Another consideration are whatever performance requirements you may have. If you need frequent refreshes or dealing with large data sets, Power BI Premium could be for you. If you need to guarantee dedicated hardware so that other person on PowerBI.com isn't hogging all your memory, Power BI Premium definitely is for you. Another problem that Premium can solve is it can allow you to have an incremental migration plan to the cloud. You can start with Power BI Report Server, which is included, and start making Power BI reports there. Then you can move mission critical reports to Premium. And finally, you can move any existing SSRS reports to PowerBI.com. The very last problem that this offering solves is if you want a hybrid solution, whether you're split across geographies or you want to keep some of your more confidential reports on premises with Power BI Report Server, you can accomplish a more complex reporting topology with Power BI Premium. However you slice it, Power BI Premium represents a significant investment, so you really should give it some thought before making that jump. In this module, we took a look at premium capacity. Premium capacity is like renting a whole bus instead of buying bus tickets for each person. We looked at the 3 different levels of premium capacity. A level for commercial applications, the EM level for Office 365 embedding, and the P level for premium, or the creme de la creme. Finally, as we walked through how to manage premium capacity, we learned that premium capacity is assigned to the App Workspaces, to the content itself. We are licensing content, not individual users. People get tripped on this all the time. In the next module, we're going to look more at the application level, and you'll see how you can use Power BI embedded in your custom applications. In this module, we're going to look at Power BI Embedded, which is a way of embedding Power BI into your applications. Most of the time, when you're interacting with Power BI reports, you're doing so through the interface of PowerBI.com as shown here. And those bars on the left and the top of the screen, those are sometimes called Chrome. They are the shiny metal casing around the inner goodness of your reports. Well, what if you want to move that reporting center into your own Chrome, your own UI, your own outer shell? Power BI Embedded allows you to do just that. Power BI Embedded is designed for commercial applications and in some cases, large internal applications. Really, if you want to work with this, you're going to need web developers and preferably a team of them. If, on the other hand, you're looking to put some Power BI reports into your intranet, this is not the right choice for you, and this is overkill. I definitely recommend checking out some of the other options in this course on how to solve a problem like that. Power BI Embedded is a way of wrapping the Power BI rendering engine in custom software. Now, to reiterate this point, I have a quote from the Microsoft Power BI Embedded FAQ. When asked who the target audience of Power BI Embedded is, they have this quote: developers and software companies making their own applications, which are referred to as independent software vendors. If you don't work for an independent software vendor, this is not the right solution for you. So what are the benefits of Power BI Embedded? I'm going to call them the 3 E's. First is embed. As should be obvious by now, Power BI Embedded allows your users to have the same Power BI experience without ever leaving your application. Second is extend. You can take advantage of the Power BI Embedded APIs to interact with these reports dynamically, or to say extend the user interface. Finally is expense. And this is how you handle your expenses. Power BI Embedded uses scalable dedicated capacity. This allows you to scale up and down as needed and as your company grows. So, let's talk about how the App Workspace model functions so that we can contrast this with how Power BI Embedded is different. First is the report authoring experience. As we talked about before, when using App Workspaces, you're going to be creating those reports in Power BI Desktop. Once you've created those reports, you need some way to package and organize them, and this is done with App Workspaces. At the same time that you're organizing your reports and dashboards, those reporting artifacts need to be hosted somewhere. Whenever you normally use App Workspaces, you're hosting that content on the Power BI service. Specifically, you're hosting on the shared capacity model of the Power BI service. In this model, you're licensing the users, not the price of hosting the content or rendering the reports. Finally, you need a way to consume those reports. And while there's a number of options, including Power BI Mobile, this is typically done via the powerbi.com website. So now that we have these 4 pieces of how to use the App Workspace, let's see what's different with Power BI Embedded. So first, you're going to have the exact same authoring experience that you're used to. It'll still be done in Power BI Desktop. Additionally, you'll have the same packaging and managing experience as well. App Workspaces are the way to package your content to be consumed by Power BI Embedded. What changes, however, is the hosting experience and the end user experience. Now, instead of hosting your reports on shared capacity, you're going to dedicate capacity using the Azure portal. Additionally, instead of the user going to powerbi.com to consume the reports, they'll go to your application. So as you can see, a lot of the backend experience is exactly the same, allowing you to reuse your existing skill set. So now that we understand what Power BI Embedded is and why you might use it, let's dig in a little bit deeper on how to get started with it. There's only 4 steps you need to take to get rolling with Power BI Embedded and set up your development and deployment environment. First, you're going to need to register your application with Azure Active Directory and give it the proper permissions, so that way it's going to be able to act on behalf of your users. Then, you'll have to create an app workspace that will hold all of your content. Well, you have some content, don't you? If you don't, you can use the Microsoft blog demo files that we use in our demo here. Next, you'll have to create some dedicated capacity to support the rendering and hosting of that content. Finally, you've got an app workspace, you have some dedicated capacity, you're going to have to assign that app workspace to that dedicated capacity. In the rest of the module, we'll show you how to do all of this, plus what code is involved with embedding the reports. The important thing to take away from all of this is that your application is acting as an intermediary between your users and your data. It takes your content and says, I'll handle all of the licensing and authorization. And then all the backend work is the same for you. You're using the same report authoring tools and the same Power BI service. The difference is that your application is acting as a middleman for your users and the Power BI service. So in order to act as that intermediary, we need to register our application with Azure Active Directory. Then we're going to have to give it some permissions. First is to act on behalf of a user, which is important to be able to act as that intermediary or go-between. Next, we're going to have to give it all of the Power BI permissions so that it can interact with the Power BI service. Finally, we're going to need a master account later on so that the application can authenticate as that account. This master account should have access to all of the data that we want to be able to show to the users. Once we've registered the application, we need some content. What we would do is create an app workspace. And this app workspace is a container that acts as wrapping paper, so to speak, for your reporting artifacts. Now, we cover this in a different module, so we're not going to go into any more depth here. But I think it's important that you know, and I've said this multiple times already, you're going to have the same experience no matter whether you're working with PowerBI.com or Power BI Embedded. You're going to organize your content exactly the same. Once we have our content, we need some dedicated capacity. We need a place to put it where we don't have to license each and every user. That's what we mean when we say dedicated capacity, is that it is virtual computing resources that have been assigned to manage specific content, and it is dedicated for that purpose. You'll be doing this in Azure, either via the Azure portal or the APIs. And because this is managed via Azure, you can expect to be billed on an hourly basis, not a monthly basis like you would get with the P1 level of Power BI Premium, for example. And also in contrast, you can pause this capacity. This is just like if you were spinning up some virtual machines in Azure. This is the essence of on-demand cloud-based computing. Related to that is that you can scale just like you can with other services in the cloud, and you can scale up and down whenever you want. There are 8 different levels of capacity available, so you can easily stair-step your way up as demand increases. Finally, there are some requirements if you want to be able to create this dedicated capacity for your application to use. First is that whenever you're signing into Azure, you're going to need to use your organizational account. So this is an account that was created by your organization, think your Office 365 account, that sort of thing, and is tied to your Azure Active Directory. This is different than a Microsoft personal account, which may have the same email address but was created by you. You can't use a Microsoft personal account. Second, there has to be a Power BI tenant, which effectively means at least one user in your organization has to be licensed with Power BI Pro. Finally, your organizational directory needs to have an associated Azure subscription that's tied to it. Finally, once you've created your content and created your dedicated capacity, you have to assign the content to that capacity. Now, as we'll see in the demo, we don't have to do this during our initial testing. However, there's a limited number of embed keys that any given account can create before you put that content into dedicated capacity. Finally, this is a reminder, and I know I keep saying it, but this trips up so many people. With Power BI Embedded, we're licensing the content. We are not licensing the users. In this demo, we'll show you how to register an application, embed an actual report, and then finally, spin up some dedicated capacity to support that reporting. So Microsoft has a tutorial for getting up and running with Power BI Embedded. And I have a link to that in the exercise notes, but I also have here the GitHub repository. So you can see they have it up at Microsoft/Power BI developer samples. Now, I've already cloned this down and opened it up in Visual Studio. And in the web.config file, there's 4 pieces of information that I need to fill in. I need to fill in application ID, workspace ID, and then username and password. So let's get that information. So the first thing is we can close out GitHub, and we're at the Azure portal, and I need to register an application. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to all services, and I'm going to type in app, and it's going to search, and I'm going to find app registrations. So I don't have any apps registered right now, so I'm going to register a new application. And so I'm going to call it PBI. I'm going to pick native, and then I'm going to give it a redirect URI. So the redirect URI, you want that to be whatever the URL is whenever you're developing with Visual Studio, and then later wherever it's going to be deployed to. So I've just set it to localhost at a specific port, and I'm going to say create. So I've created it, but I still have some work to do. So I have to go to settings and then required permissions, and I have to give it some additional permissions. So first, for Azure Active Directory, it needs to be able to access the directory as the signed in user. And the user it's going to be signed in as is a proxy account. It's a master account. In this case, it's me. It just has to be something that has global admin privileges. Next, I'm going to add permissions
to Power BI. So I'm going to select an API, and I can see right here is the Power BI service. And we talked about that at the beginning of the course, what the Power BI service is. So I'm just going to give it everything just to make my life easier. And so I'm going to say done. And then, so I don't have to manually grant permissions, I'm going to do it here and just grant it for everything. Under normal circumstances, you might have it so you're using OAuth in your application to ask the user to have the permissions required. So I've set everything up, and now I've got an application ID. So I can hover over this and click to copy. And so now it's been copied. So I can go back to Visual Studio, and I can put in the application ID. Next, I need a workspace ID. And so this is interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Power BI. Now notice that I've gone to the new App Workspace. Do not go to Apps and then the application, because you're going to get the wrong globally unique identifier. But if we go up here, we can see here's groups, and then right here is the group ID that we need. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. I'm going to put that in there. And then for the username and password, again, normally this would be a master account. You don't want to have your username and password directly in the application. You want to have that somewhere else that's not in source control so that you don't accidentally expose everything. I would be a fool to just type in my information here, but I'm just going to blur it out instead. Okay, I'm going to save everything. And if it worked, we're going to be able to embed the report. And now I'm going to click on the embed report example. And we can see the report from the App Workspace earlier in the course is here. And again, I can interact with it, I can make changes, I can do whatever. And as you can see where it says view as different user, if I had set this up for row level security, then I could assign roles to individual users based on whatever I desire, based on their username in my application. At no point does the person have to be logged into Azure Active Directory. So this is how you can get up and running with embedding Power BI reports using Power BI Embedded. So we've been able to set up our application with Power BI Embedded, and it's working, but we never backed it with premium capacity. And so if a regular user tries to view those reports, it's not going to work. So how do we get around that? Well, what we have to do is we have to purchase and set up some premium capacity. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to All Services. So I'm going to type in Power BI. And what I want is Power BI Embedded. I don't want Power BI Workspace Collection, because that's kind of from the beta version of Power BI Embedded. So I don't have any capacity currently. I'm going to add some. I'm just going to call it Power BI, and I'm going to create a resource group. I'm the capacity administrator, which is perfect. And then the pricing tier, I want the lowest pricing tier. I want one virtual core, and that's going to cost me around $700 some per month if I were to leave it running all of the time, which I'm definitely not planning on doing. All right, so let's hit refresh and see if our Power BI is there. Perfect. So we can see that it's active and it's size A1. So now we need to assign workspaces to that capacity. So I'm going to go over to Power BI, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Workspaces, and I'm going to click the ... and I'm going to click Edit Workspace. And if we scroll all the way down, there's Advanced, and hiding behind that is Dedicated Capacity. Doesn't look like it's realized that we have that capacity. Let's try and just refresh and see if that fixes it. There we go. So now I'm going to hit Save. So now you can see over on the left, there's a little diamond icon by our App Workspace. This means that it's backed by premium capacity. This means that we can have our application point to that App Workspace without having to pay on a per user basis. And so now you can deploy your application and have your users use it. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on a few things to check out once you're comfortable with the basics of Power BI Embedded. So the first thing that I would recommend is check out Microsoft's Embedded Playground. This is 100% free. You don't have to spin up capacity. You don't have to make any content. You don't have to do anything. They have that already for you, and you can see pre-built code, see examples, run them, modify them, all for free. So I definitely recommend checking this out if you want to look a little bit deeper into Power BI Embedded. Another thing that I would look into is how to implement row level security.
You may be thinking, well, if we're using a master account as a go-between for all of our users, how do we secure our information per user? And the way that you do that is row-level security. You're able to assign roles that will filter the data on a row level. Now, this concept is outside of the scope of this course, but we have another course by Alexander Arvidsson called Power BI Playbook, Securing Shared Data with Power BI. And so he has a module in there on how to implement row-level security that I really recommend you check out. Finally, if you're looking to get an idea of something simple that you could do with Power BI Embedded, you can extend the context menu. Adam Saxton on his YouTube channel has guest Ron Brewer, who's one of the developers for Power BI Embedded, and they show you how to extend the context menu when you right-click on a visual. First, they show you a little bit with the Power BI Embedded Playground, and then how to actually implement the code. And it's really a great way to see some of the things that you can do and go above and beyond with Power BI Embedded. In this module, we talked about the purpose of Power BI Embedded, which is for custom commercial applications. It is not to be confused with Power BI Embedding, which could mean publish to web, it could mean SSRS style embedding, it could mean Office 365 embedding. No, we're talking about Power BI Embedded, which is for custom applications. We walked through the steps to set up your development and deployment environment, and then we looked at how to write a page that embeds a report. Finally, I listed a few resources for you to check out next if you're excited about this tooling. In the next module, we're going to wrap up with Power BI Report Server. In this module, we're going to talk about Power BI Report Server. It's your cloud reporting solution, but on premises, which is an oxymoron if I ever heard of one. So what is Power BI Report Server anyway? Well, are you familiar with SQL Server reporting services? It's been around for over a decade now, and it's used to host and render paginated reports. And it's included with Microsoft SQL Server. Think invoices, accounting reports, anything that needs to be pixel perfect, anything that has an address on it. Well, Power BI Report Server is SSRS plus Power BI rendering. And that's basically it. All of the goodness you've come to love with SSRS plus the nice, sleek, interactive reporting of Power BI. And all of it's on premises. Now, there are some extra pieces of plumbing involved, specifically for data refreshes and some other things, but that's the gist of it. So, why go with Power BI Report Server? Well, let's cover that right now. In this section, we're going to look at some of the pros and cons of Power BI Report Server. So let's start with the benefits of Power BI Report Server. First, it provides a single place for your reporting. This is especially valuable if you have a heavy investment in SSRS. Now, this value add is going to go away some over time as things change. Specifically, Microsoft has added support for rendering SSRS reports in the cloud if you have Power BI Premium. Now, that is pretty expensive, but I wouldn't be surprised if long-term they add support for everywhere. Second, there's core-based licensing. This is similar to what we talked about with Power BI Premium. You pay for one big, beefy server instead of individual users. Third is on-premises reporting. Many companies are under heavy regulation and can't move their data to the cloud. Power BI Report Server allows users to get the same visualization and data modeling tools without leaving their data center. Fourth is that this provides a half step to the cloud. It's a way to create reports that are cloud ready if your organization isn't quite ready to make the full jump yet, but wants to move in that direction. Finally, the last benefit is branding. With the Power BI service, everything is branded as powerbi.com. You have no choice. However, with the web portal for the Power BI Report Server, you can retheme it and have a more cohesive experience for your users. Well, nothing is ever all sunshine and roses. So what are the main downsides of the Power BI Report Server? The biggest one? It's expensive as heck. There are two ways to license it currently. First is with Power BI Premium P level. Based on that level, you automatically get a certain number of cores licensed for Power BI Report Server. This is going to cost anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 per month. That's a lot. Second, you can license SQL Server Enterprise Edition and pay for software assurance, which is a program that keeps your Microsoft licenses up to date for costs. Enterprise Edition is also expensive and is going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars per licensing cycle. Either way you slice it, you're going to be paying a lot of money. The second big limitation is that Power BI Report Server is only updated quarterly. Longer if your IT shop is like most enterprises and takes its good old time. The Power BI service, in contrast, is updated monthly, and you don't have to wait for Carol in IT to update your servers either. Because of this limitation, you're also going to have to use a custom version of the Power BI desktop, which is optimized for Power BI Report Server. This version can still publish to the cloud, but it also only gets quarterly updates. You can't take the latest version of Power BI Desktop and publish to Power BI Report Server. It has to be a matched version. The last big limitation is there's no dashboard functionality, at least as Microsoft defines it anyway. As we discussed at the beginning of this course, dashboards are more of a navigation tool than a reporting tool in terms of Power BI dashboards. You can still make a bunch of charts and tell your boss that it's a dashboard, and she'll be none the wiser. In this demo, we're going to get you up and running with Power BI Report Server by showing you how to install and then configure the report server. So now we're going to walk through how to install and configure Power BI Report Server. And if you've worked with SQL Server reporting services, it's going to look very similar. And for an unsurprising reason, because under the hood, it's largely the same code. Now, I've already installed Power BI Desktop, but you'll notice this says March 2018. Why is that? It's because I'm running an optimized version of Power BI Desktop designed to work with Power BI Report Server. We can't use the latest and greatest because Power BI Report Server is only updated quarterly. So if you want to deploy to Power BI Report Server, you need to install a specialized version of Power BI Desktop. There's nothing exciting with the installation process there, so I've already done that. But on the desktop, I have Power BI Report Server. So let's go ahead and run that installer. All right, so let's go ahead and install Power BI Report Server. Now, in this case, I'm just going to install the Evaluation Edition. I have to accept the license. Now, this is kind of funny how they have it. You notice there's a radio box, but there's no other option here. It just says Install Power BI Report Server only. Now, I don't know if they used to have a different option or they're planning on adding more of a self-contained version later, but right now we're only installing the report server, which means we need SQL Server installed somewhere to support this. So I'm just going to go with the defaults. All right, well, I'm glad you didn't have to sit through all that because that took like 5 minutes. But now we'll notice that the setup is complete, but we have to configure things manually. And this was not always the case, at least for SQL Server reporting services. It would set everything up to go whenever you would install it, but they've separated things out. So we're going to go ahead and configure the report server. And so a couple things that we need to do. First, we need to give it a database. And we need to say, okay, what server are we going to use? So here we're going to use this server, and we will use the current user. All right, great. So we're going to click Finish. And so now it's associated with a specific database. It's created a report server database. The problem is we still need to set up some other pieces. So we're going to set up the web service URL, which is how other applications communicate with the report server. Okay, great. So we have one last step. We want to set up the web portal URL. And these virtual directory names, these URLs, should look really familiar if you've ever done any administration for SQL Server reporting services. So again, we're going to click on Apply. Okay, great. So now it's all configured. And that's all there is to setting up and installing Power BI Report Server. In the next clip, we're going to look at how do we actually get Power BI reports onto the server. In this demo, we'll show you how to publish a report to Power BI Report Server using the custom version of Power BI Desktop. So in the last clip, we set up and installed Power BI Report Server. And so now in this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to access that and how to create and upload a report to Power BI Report Server. So I'm going to go to Internet Explorer. And I'm going to have to give it a little bit of a refresh because it's just getting started up. And now I've got Power BI Report Server up and running. Now there's nothing here, but you can see that we've got the web portal. And this is going to be a very familiar experience if you use SQL Server reporting services. So let's go ahead and make a report. And you can see that it can support all these different types of reports. But we want a Power BI report. And so it's going to open up Power BI Desktop for me to be able to make those changes to write that report. So I'm going to go ahead and close that banner, and I'm going to add a text box. And I'm going to make the font really, really big and just say testing. Now I'm going to do File, Save As, and you can see that I could save it as a file, or I could save it to Power BI Report Server. And I've already cached localhost. I'm just going to call this test.pbix. Great, so now I can go and take a look at it. I know it's not too exciting, but the exciting part is that we're on Power BI Report Server. This is all on premises, all on a local machine. I don't have to go out to the cloud at all. And I can go back to home, and I can see that the file's there. And so I could organize this in a hierarchical structure with folders and that sort of thing. So that's everything that you need to know to get up and running with Power BI Report Server. In a previous module on embedding, we mentioned that you could embed reports using the existing capabilities of SQL Server reporting services. In this demo, we'll show you how to do that by embedding using an iframe, just like we did when we did publish to web. So here we have Power BI Report Server, and here we have a Microsoft-made Power BI report. And even though maybe we normally like this experience, maybe we want to embed this report somewhere else. And so we can do that using an iframe. So first, what we have to do is we have to make some modifications to this URL. So we're going to go to the end. We're going to add on rs:\embed equals true. And so we're adding in a parameter, a URL parameter to say, turn this into embeddable format. And so when I do that, what it does is it gives us just the report and nothing else. And so now what we can do is we can take this whole URL, and I've created a really simple, pretty much nothing there web page. And we used something similar when we were doing public embedding. And we're going to make a modification. We're going to open up Notepad, and for source, we're going to put in that URL. Going to hit save, and then we're just going to refresh this page. And so now you can see that it's loaded the report. So any web page that we have, as long as the user has access to the report server, we can embed any sort of Power BI report from report server into that page, or even into an application that supports a web browser. And so that's all you really need to know to start embedding Power BI reports from report server into other web pages. In this module, we learned that the Power BI report server is the on-premises solution if you want to render Power BI reports. We also learned that that capability comes at a cost, as well as with a few minor limitations. Finally, we showed you how to get up and running with Power BI report server. Next, we'll wrap up with a recap of the entire course. In the beginning of this course, we listed all the ways to deploy Power BI content by using a scale perspective, starting in a team of 5 and working up to 5,000 users. In the recap, I want to look at things from a different angle. First are all the different ways to deploy content directly to the Power BI service. First, it's just writing a report and hitting publish. By default, it'll go to your local workspace, but that's not sharing or collaborating. So the next step is to manually share reports and dashboards. And that works fine for a while, but it doesn't scale. So after that, we wrapped all of our content in a nice wrapping paper and bow known as an App Workspace. Next, we talked about content packs, which are a predecessor to App Workspaces and are deprecated. Finally, when you want even more scale within the Power BI service, you want to look at premium capacity. So those are all the options that involve the user going to powerbi.com to read a report. But what if we want to have the content elsewhere? Well, for internal use cases, we can look at Office 365 embedding with SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams. Or, if we want to pay a little bit extra, we can go with Power BI Report Server. Finally, what if we want to reach a broad audience that's outside of our organization? Well, the cheapest option is public embedding, known as publish to web. But if we're selling an application, we have application embedding, also known as Power BI Embedded. That's it. Just 9 different ways to deploy Power BI content. That wasn't so bad, was it?